call this public hearing to order. This is a public hearing on zoning cases 2021-11LU and 2021-12T, and let the record reflect all three trustees are here, along with Mr. Kellums and Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, this is your show, I think, for now. What do we got here?
Yes, sir. All right.
And first I'll note for the record, it's 6 p.m. on Tuesday, December 21st, 2021. Go ahead.
Okay, we have two cases to be reviewed by the board tonight. The first, as you said, 2021-11LU. This is the kind of the next generation, the new version of the Sycamore Township Land Use Plan. This has been heard, if not countless, at least numerous times through the development process with the Sycamore Township Land Use Steering Committee. That process started in November of 2019. It went through pretty strong through, I'm going to say, April, maybe even into May of 2020, but we were kind of stymied with COVID and what have you. And then we picked that up a year later in May of 2021. And worked pretty aggressively through the summer to get that done. We submitted this in the late summer, early fall to the Sycamore Township Zoning Commission, who reviewed this multiple times, I believe starting in August, and with some minor adjustments by those board members. As well as the addition of a policy area section I'll get into. It was pretty well adopted by them as well, and they make the recommendation to approve. So I've probably went through this document over at least a dozen times with various groups. My goal tonight was not to go page by page through this document, but to really talk about more the land use theory, how this is structured, and then we can go over the various policy areas, which is really, along with the future land use plan, is really the heart of the document. So, in the past we've always tried to kind of hyper define our land uses through the land use map. It's led to kind of numerous levels of land use classification on a map. The overall character of Sycamore Township is one of a mature community that's very well developed with kind of few and far between, vacant land. Everything that we do, or almost everything that we do as a township, is with a redevelopment mindset. Okay, that may be redeveloping just to modernize the use that's underlying. It could be, an increase in intensity, or it could be an actual land use change. But at any rate, it's always with that redevelopment mindset, and with little infill. So with that being said, the character of Sycamore Township is in a certain sense eclectic, but it's also the character changes from one area, from one neighborhood to the next. So this new structure that we're proposing, and this is a total replacement of the existing land use plan, not an adjustment, not an amendment to the existing land use plan. It's a replacement. What we're looking at is a simplification of land classifications at the map level. Okay, and then we look at the individual character of the neighborhoods, or in this case, policy areas. And that's really where you see the if not customization, the more critical eye on how we want certain areas to develop. Starting with the land use steering committee, there was always this theme of, well, we are developing. There is this push for commercial development in our community, but we want to protect and preserve our existing residential areas. So it's almost like a policy battle lines, if you will. These shifting boundaries between our commercial uses and those the commercial creep, if you will, and preservation of the residential. So with that, I'm going to jump right into discussing the land use map. There we go. So let's start with talking about North Sycamore. Okay. Again, and I'm going to I can pull up a comparison map for you of the north area from our 2008 land use plan. But essentially, one of the things we tried to do is reduce some of these levels of or categories within the land use plan by getting rid of these kind of ambiguous transitional uses. We kind of replace those with our mixed use designation. Okay, and that mixed use allows for some more flexibility between kind of combined retail office uses, as well as allowing for a residential mix. Where you see the higher level of control is in the policy areas. Okay, North Sycamore is not. You don't see a significant change. We did hear some interest with possibly doing a residential piece on Fields Erdel, just to the east of Reed Hartman Highway. So instead of leaving this as office, we allowed for a mixed use. There's always been an interest with preserving or having some kind of residential buffer here as you go further east into this residential area anyways. So allowing for a transitional residential component here was considered desirable. Okay.
Is that the piece we own?
That is not. Actually, the piece we own is these two lots right here. So
I think, wasn't there a proposal on that property already?
there was a proposal on that property. Yep.
Okay.
So, whoops. Okay. Let's see here. Aside from that, what you're seeing is instead of some of these areas here, instead of the varying degrees of residential, they've been collapsed into the larger suburban residential category, or multifamily. That's the big difference that you're going to see in North Sycamore.
Now, there's no longer a heavy industrial category either, is there?
Well, there's no longer a heavy industrial category because we don't have a zoning district that allows for heavy industrial. So the heavy industrial that you saw before had to do with existing uses. Okay, and we do have a small section of the township that could be classified as heavy industrial. I think we've got a scrapyard, transfer station. Those really don't fall into the light industrial category. So we're kind of dealing with a couple different mindsets. You have your existing uses, which you just have to call them as you see them, whether they fit in a category or not. You have your future land uses, how we see things growing and how we see things kind of coming into compliance with our zoning code. All right, and then you have your zoning districts. So something may have an underlying zoning district that's different than its land use or future land use classification, which is also different than its what we see in the real world today. Okay.
Hey, Scott, I'll go back to Kemper Road.
Yep.
So the on the north side of Kemper, right near the utility.
Yep.
The 4-story office building.
Okay.
So
Here, this area.
yeah. So that
Okay.
one parcel out front, we own that parcel, I believe. Shouldn't that show green instead of blue?
Well, this whole what we're seeing is this whole corridor being used for office uses. The lot that we own to the front is for stormwater management,
Right.
almost wholly. So it's not. It doesn't act as a standalone recreation area, although I think there may be
Gotcha.
a walkway around it.
I'm good.
It's part of the office area.
Gotcha.
Yep. So that's the argument there. There was some question. I think zoning commission ultimately left this area up here along School Road as parks and recreation. I was inclined to recode that as vacant land. That's not to say that a future parks project couldn't take that over and have some active recreation on it. But as it stands now, there's no facilities there, no controlled parking, no real public access. I don't necessarily want to encourage people to explore that area, on their own. So it may behoove us to talk about that site and just, for the time being on our future land use plan, call that vacant land. There's another area in South Sycamore that we do that. Actually, a couple places in South Sycamore. So we may want to circle back to this and recode that.
How many acres is that?
Approximately 16.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. It's approximately 16 acres. It should be noted there is a significant valley with a creek running through there.
Yeah, the topography's tough.
Topography is very tough.
What's the practical impact of changing that one way or another if it's township-owned ground anyway?
It's really more of a mindset. Do we want to have any type of public documentation that shows that as parks and recreation land? If somebody wants to venture out into that, is there a liability for the township? If we mark it as vacant, we're not claiming it as part of our park system. That's
Well, if we mark it as vacant and then on our website call it parkland, on the other hand, we are saying that in a different way.
my argument is to not call it park anywhere.
Yeah.
So we definitely don't want to do it on this. If there is funding at a later date, if there's a desire to move that needle toward active recreation, then it's a simple amendment. But I don't want to dictate park policy with this plan. So if we want to leave it as parkland, that's fine.
In the past, haven't we used taken all our green space and kind of lumped it into the parks, or no?
It depends. So I'll go ahead, and this is a good segue into our South Sycamore area. The township jointly owns. There's some parcels that are owned by the township, some by the Hamilton County Commissioners along Ronald Reagan Highway here. This, I believe, has been vacant. Yeah, it's been coded vacant, I believe, in the past as well. It's kind of hard to see on here. It's actually being shown as open space, not parks and recreation land. or recreation. But in South Sycamore, we're calling that vacant land. There's really no public access to a lot of this. It's behind residential property. The desire is to have as dense of a green open space area as possible to mitigate any noise or nuisance from the highway. So we're kind of following that same mentality here by calling that vacant land. There's no, and also by coding it vacant, we're also saying we have no intention in the future of doing anything with that. Okay? Yeah, come on. Hang on, sorry. All right, my clicker won't move right. Okay, so let me scroll in here. Okay, this is the area that we're calling South Sycamore in the land use plan. Obviously, this is our neighborhoods: Dylanville, Kenwood, Concord Hills, Ross Moyne, our central business district here in Kenwood. Again, there's an attempt here to simplify the land use plan so you can easily identify the predominant uses. Since we don't have the road layer turned on here, I'll just briefly describe the area. Right here we have roughly going north-south, I-71. On the slant here going through is Montgomery Road, State Route 3. Here, East Galbraith. Okay, Kenwood Road. So this area right here in red is Kenwood Town Center and Sycamore Plaza. Okay. Moving to the west, we're moving into Ross Moyne Dylanville area. Over here, this red is the Dylanville Shopping Center. Okay. So again, like I said, this is Cross County Highway. Let's see. This area here is Bechtold Park. We do have a light industrial area up here. That's is that Ross Plain Road and that area, right? Okay. Let's see. And let's see. This area, this is Blue Ash Road, which also has the sort of owned rail line. Okay. There is an attempt, let's see here. The big changes in this area that I want to talk about have to do with the Blue Ash Road corridor. Okay. A lot of this area in the past was either just designated mixed-use office with some transitional residential, and for the most part, we've followed that line, but this mixed use is basically, from kind of this group think tank is we see this area developing in the future. We don't have a crystal ball of how it's going to go. We want to be mindful of establishing a new residential commercial boundary. Obviously, along Blue Ash Road, the railway, we're going to see commercial uses, but how far back into those neighborhoods do we go? This is the one area where we don't have a policy area that was automatically identified as being our first update to this document. We're certainly going to need to take a tighter look at that. But anyways, we extend this down to Galbraith. we still see this as a mixed use and office corridor along Galbraith with kind of the new boundary. It's similar to 2008, but we kind of see these end caps, fronting on East Galbraith, moving towards the office and medical office environment. We see that natural progression, and believe that we can establish that appropriate boundary to the rear. Okay. Mixed use instead of transitional residential is a big change along the Montgomery Road corridor. We've attempted to address this with multiple policy areas along Montgomery Road. We have a Montgomery Road Central. I'll have to go back and look. We ended up changing these names quite a bit just recently. Let's see. We have the Montgomery Road corridor policy area, and then I guess it didn't make it. One second. Yeah, Montgomery Road Central is what we ended up calling that second area. So I'll talk about the policy areas in just a moment.
Is there a definition for mixed use spelled out in here?
There is. One second. Well, there was supposed to be. Hang on one second. All right, well, I apologize. There was. Give me 1 second.
One of the problems we ran into with the old one is there were some undefined terms, so we want to
Yep.
make sure we're defining everything here.
No, I agree. That version Well, I apologize. We that must have been. Here we go. There we go. Mixed uses comprise less than 1% of the total land use in the township. Mixed uses are buildings with multiple different uses, such as office retail or retail and residential, the Kenwood collection. So we do talk about it here. I agree this needs to be called out in the other area. I actually had that language in there, and it may have accidentally been stripped out when we were updating from version to version.
Yeah, we need a definition with density, lot coverage, all of that, like the others.
Yep. I'm not sure when that got stripped out. The point of the mixed use, I will tell you, the point of the mixed use district is to, from a land use designation, is to be a little more fluid. We're not trying at this level to tie anyone down to density. We're allowing for a variety of uses. So there's not going to be there's not a comparable one single zoning district that we can cite to talk about intensity. It's really a replacement for these transitional districts that, again, they were ambiguous. We purposely used the mixed use district as that, not as a catch-all per se, but that area to allow for more organic, market-driven growth. Okay, so I will certainly address that.
You can put that in for the resolution that we're going to be voting on.
I will try and get that done tonight. We may need to. I may need to update this at our next meeting, and to get that approved.
I'm happy not rushing through this, frankly.
We don't have to.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's not
So-
urgent. I mean, it's urgent in the sense it needs to get done in the short term, but it doesn't have to get
It's
done.
gotta be
tomorrow.
right.
It's got to be right.
Yeah.
So,
And even as to mixed use, let me just ask, looking at the Blue Ash Road corridor there, for example, it's a fairly long corridor. There are the railroad tracks, as you noted, but calling that mixed use, let's say somebody wants to go, plant a multi-story building there because suddenly that's the hot spot to be because the new library, everybody wants to be around it, for example. The neighbors around there aren't going to be real happy if our zoning classification now says, well, it's mixed. You can put pretty much whatever you want in there. It could look like the Kenwood Collection Tower.
So let me address that. Our zoning designation is not changing. We're not rezoning anybody's homes or anything in that corridor. We are talking about, this plan is actually called 2030. Okay, how do we see the land uses evolving over time? Where do we want things to grow? The Blue Ash Road corridor was identified as one of the areas that we needed a policy area for. It was not a project that the zoning commission wanted to take on their own. They were hoping to kick that back to the steering committee, but they wanted the framework document in place to build on. Okay, I will be the first to admit that this is a working document. It, as it stands, is a usable, functional document. It has it's laying the groundwork to build on. And I see, one of the things that we want to do is not let this document stay stagnant. Right. It's not going to be adopted by the board and then go sit on a shelf. It's going to be constantly used, constantly adjusted. We're probably looking, at least on an average, of doing something to this document every 2 to 3 years. But there's actually a motion. So while the zoning commission approved this document and made a recommendation to adopt it, they immediately made a motion to revisit the Blue Ash Road corridor and adopt a policy area within the first half of the year. So they already have a working project for themselves and for the steering committee. So that and if I haven't explained this already, this is probably a good conversation. Again, there's kind of the 30,000 foot view of the township that we use with the simplified land use plan or the land use map. Okay, and then we have several policy areas that we're trying to establish. These are the character areas. So I will go into those with a little more detail. Going back to North Sycamore, we're looking at Grooms Road and Kemper. Okay, we talk about the current the current state of these policy areas, the typical status of them, what we see as existing uses, and then we move on to more of the vision for these individual policy areas, where we see them growing, what types of densities, what types of zone changes could possibly happen. So, and then the big component here is implementation strategies. How do we move that needle to where we want to go? So, whether it's design or policy cues for the zoning commission, or possibly possibly other grants or initiatives that the township can take on. Okay, we have, let's see, after Grooms Road, we have the Kemper Road corridor. The big push here, of course, is to continue with the office and light industrial uses. Let's see here. Basically, anywhere in the township where we have a major corridor, that's where we want to focus on high intensity. Okay. Village Green. This is a policy area we talked about. This is one of our aging. Mobile home sites. The property is actually already zoned F light industrial, so it is kind of prime for redevelopment. So we're certainly, we're going to continue to, push for redevelopment of this site as future light industrial, future office. Okay. We have the Reed Hartman Fields Erdel Road policy area. This is actually kind of a mixed split area. This is we have a nursing home as well as an office on the east side of Reed Hartman Highway on Fields Erdel Road. We're certainly looking for either commercial or mixed-use development along Fields Erdel Road, and then we actually asked ourselves what we wanted to do with the church property, and the question was we're not trying to push a new use or push a church out of the township, but over time churches can sell. So if this were to redevelop in some way, what would it be? Because of its location, kind of on a stub street through a neighborhood, we can envision that developing as suburban residential, just a continuation of
Makes
that.
sense.
Yep. All right, moving into South Sycamore, we have the Kenwood Town Center, Sycamore Plaza. Obviously this is a kind of a lifeblood economic engine of the township. The vision for this is to continue with upscale retail services, office, mixed-use development. We do acknowledge that redevelopment of this is going to be major redevelopment with new construction over top of existing. We want to maintain existing zoning designations in this area. The one big item, one big item we did talk about is allowing for mixed-use buildings to the south along I-75, especially at like Sycamore Plaza or across the street.
71.
What's that?
I-71.
I-70. What did I say?
75.
Oh, thank you. All right. Along I-71, and what the zoning commission was talking about there was allowing for office retail uses and then possibly have a residential component, not at surface grade, but at higher story. So it was one of the driving mechanisms that we were hoping to see that could generate some more density, especially on the Sycamore Plaza lot. Or the other item that we were talking about is St. Vincent. On the horizon we have the new facilities plan or development plan for the Archdiocese. I don't think we were talking about that, 6-9 months ago. They could possibly reduce up to 40% of their properties. What do we do if that church were to redevelop? Where do we see that going? Okay. Jewish hospital policy area. The big issue here is allowing for future growth of the hospital while not continuing to encroach into the neighboring subdivisions, Holiday Acres especially. So this policy area tries to thread the needle between allowing for some growth of Jewish hospital while not impacting those single-family homes. Okay. And then we have what's called the Redstone Center. This does actually extend to the over the 7 acres that that the township owns up to the intersection and abuts the Kenwood policy area. Okay. This we're really calling for mixed-use development with a focus on office and retail. Okay. So this is the first of one, or excuse me, the first of 2 Montgomery Road corridors or policy areas. The first one is just labeled as Montgomery Road. This area includes the FBI facility, our vacant land over here, grains of Kenwood. We have Kenwood Towers, and essentially everything to the east of I-71 and north and fronting on East Galbraith. Okay, and this does abut our neighboring jurisdiction here in Madeira. Okay. Big idea here, it's similar to some of our others, is protecting those existing residential areas, while still allowing for high intensity office and commercial. All right. So this was kind of a last minute addition by the zoning commission, but because of recent interest in developing in this corridor, we felt that it was appropriate to incorporate it into this version of the plan. So this is what was finally decided on as Montgomery Road Central. So this is an area that runs essentially north of, it kind of starts along Kugler Mill, or I'm sorry, at Kugler Mill and runs up to Kennedy along Montgomery Road in the township. It's a little broken up. We're trying to identify those developable areas along Kugler Mill while keeping the residential intact. So the big issue here, the one piece of vacant land that we have is right here, just north of the old Willie's location, and across the street from Mercedes-Benz. This area in the past has changed quite a bit. In the 2002 plan, it was there was a component of this that was office space, or excuse me, not office space, open space, which was kind of along the sloping south area of it. The 2008 plan calls for, let me go back to this, calls for this transitional use with office, that we had some debate over the definition and what would appropriately fall in there. So we're trying to nail this down. And this plan, this was not rezoned, but redesignated as true office. But the policy area limits the overall density. Okay, so the neighborhood to the south, or excuse me, not to the south, but to the east, was actually not represented in the meetings, but I did have conversations with their attorneys, and they reviewed this policy area. The idea is that we do allow for that property to rezone to office, but based on the overall size of that, you're looking at a maximum of about 15,000 to 20,000 square feet of available office space.
So that's changed from residential.
Well,
you're gonna have all those houses there.
The current plan has that as transitional use with office. Okay,
Which was an undefined term previously.
which was an undefined term. We are designating that as office, but when you look at the policy area, it limits the overall, or it makes a recommendation to limit the maximum density on that site. This is actually an interesting property that we have. There has been what I would consider high intensity office proposals on that site that have been turned down by the township. There's been moderate and low density multifamily that has been turned down by the township. We're almost putting ourselves in a corner. You know, at some point we have to allow for some kind of development on that site, or somebody's going to throw a takings argument against us. So the last time that we looked at this site, we said, well, the multifamily doesn't fit the category because we need an office user in here. So the land use steering committee and the commission, they're listening. They're saying, okay, we're going to designate this as office, but we're going to limit the overall density. The attorney for those property owners back there looked at it and said, we love it. We're good with it. So there's no argument about this.
15,000 to 20.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the final. The total size of that site. It's been a while since I reviewed it, but based on this, you're looking at kind of like 2 to 3 1 or 2 story buildings, totaling 20,000 square feet with associated parking. You could probably do, not to call them out here, but like a Lucky style, office complex with maybe, you could either do a parking underneath or office underneath with some surface parking. That would all fit and be reasonable on that site. So residential style roofs, that could certainly be accommodated on that site. Okay. So like I said, this was a late addition, but it was very well received. Okay. And then finally, the biggest change that we have, and I should have talked about this in the actual land use map, but this property that the township owns over here on Reading Road, this was previously zoned planned. I believe it was planned retail, and the carousel and these properties up here, with the exception of the office building, were just the standard E-retail district. The township, namely me, really for the last 2 years, and before me, the zoning staff has been working with the Hamilton County Planning Office and our regional neighbors on a project called the Reading Road Corridor Group. They are in the process of finalizing a corridor plan, which really calls for light industrial uses all along the Reading Road corridor, as well as supported ancillary uses on the smaller lots. The township-owned property here, as well as the carousel, is really considered one of the anchor sites and a catalyst site for changing that corridor into a light industrial corridor. So our land use plan reflects their recommendation to have the township-owned properties as well as the carousel to be actually all of that frontage along Reading Road to go light industrial.
Have we heard anything during any of this process from any of the residents who live in the community back there about this? I'm sure they'd love to have the pyrotechnic display out front gone to
Yeah.
get rid of the existing burning buildings, but moving to light industry, has that been a concern for anyone?
No. That's the short answer, I guess. The conversations that we have with residents in Chaucer really have to do with either cleaning up the surrounding properties or affecting some positive change. They want development in the area. They're not going to want an office building right in their backyard, and we'll have to accommodate that when we actually look at specific plans for this site.
Light industry, though, might include an Amazon distribution center, for example, wouldn't it?
It
Things
could.
like that, with truck traffic
Right.
24 hours a day.
So you already have heavy heavy transportation corridors on Cross
highway.
County,
Yeah.
Reading Road. I would certainly, if we're talking about a hypothetical distribution center here, one of the things I would not want to encourage or even allow would be a connection to Chaucer Road or Chaucer Drive. Between the township-owned properties and now the port-owned property on the carousel, we can accommodate enough access there for any commercial traffic to go right to Reading Road. So we will, as this develops, want to have an eye on residential preservation. So there are representatives on the Reading Road Corridor Group from the staff with City of Cincinnati, as well as the Neighborhood Development Corporation. So actual residents in Roselawn, they are pushing for for this economic engine in their community, and they understand that the anchor properties that we're looking at butt up to their neighborhoods. So they're still encouraging this plan.
Okay.
Okay.
What else have you got here?
Okay, so that's really an overview of the most important parts of this plan. We're talking about the land use map, the policy areas. The one item that I haven't touched on, and I promised we would tonight, is through this whole process, I've had positive discussions with residents. No issues with the map that I've seen so far, with the exception of today. I have Mr. and Mrs. Stanley here. They own a property on Montgomery Road, just south of, it's actually right at the intersection of Kugler Mill and
Montgomery.
Kugler Mill and Montgomery. Yeah, I'm trying to do too many things at once right now.
Southwest corner.
Southwest corner, thank you. Let me get back to the... Where'd my map go? There we go.
Tell you what, before we move on to that property, and as you're queuing it up here, I expect the Stanleys would like to speak about this also, perhaps. But let me ask, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller about any other portions of this first before we focus on this one particular one? Okay, that'll free us up to move on to
Okay,
that then.
good.
Yeah.
All right. So the property we are looking at is 8253 Montgomery Road. It is it's right here in this area. The Kugler Mill runs. It's split through these parcels here out to Montgomery Road. In past land use plans, that property has been designated as office. When we were going through and looking at the Kugler Mill corridor with the steering committee, we decided to, based on the situation of this site, and I'll actually pull that up here. Based on the physical, here we go. This is the property we're looking at. Based on the physical features of the site and growing concerns along the Kugler Mill corridor with some of the neighborhoods, to allow this to stay, or we pushed for this to stay suburban residential. And one of the comments that was made is that this is a very well defined streamline. We don't see this developing very easily into anything else. We'll just keep it there. That may have possibly been an error, and I'm going to let the Stanleys talk about that tonight. I don't think we had a strong opinion about this site, other than it may be difficult to develop. It is currently zoned residential. It is certain. It does have quite a bit of frontage on Montgomery Road, to all three sides, with the exception of to the west. Does have commercial uses. So this may be, a good discussion topic tonight, and I encourage the Stanleys to come tonight and speak on behalf of their property.
Okay, I just want to point out also that it's inconsistent with what you had recently just said before about us focusing on commercial uses along our main arteries.
That's true.
I mean, that's definitely not the case here. So
yeah. And Kugler Mill was certainly an interesting situation for us. We were trying to be cognizant of the current temperament, and that may have affected our discussions on this property. So.
But this is a Montgomery Road address property with access only for Montgomery Road currently.
That's correct.
Mr. Stanley, if you'd come to the podium, please, and let me ask you, and if there's anyone else who wishes to speak as to any part of the plan tonight, this is a public hearing and I need to swear you in. So anyone who intends to speak, please raise your hand. Just you? All right. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address and then let us know.
Okay. My name is James Stanley. I'm here with my wife Elizabeth, and we live at 8253 Montgomery Road. And I'm here, as mentioned, to talk about the designation of the property. And as mentioned, the current designation in the current land use plan is transitional office. The proposed designation is suburban residential. And also, as pointed out, it's bordered on three sides by offices and commercial buildings. Every land use plan up to this date has termed it as office, dating back to Hamilton County. I apologize for being here this late. We've been caring for elderly parents. My 107-year-old mother-in-law just passed away very recently.
Sorry.
And then I have just spent 2 months in Albuquerque caring for my elderly parents. And quite frankly, I did not expect the designation of our property to be changed. So again, I apologize for being here at this late hour. We have been 36-year residents at this home on Montgomery Road. There have been new offices added during that time as we've lived there. We've seen things grow around us. That's to be expected on that busy road. Over the years, we have had many people knock on the door, phone calls, letters, whatever the case may be, inquiring about purchasing the property. Those inquiries have all been to purchase it for a commercial use of one form or another. We have never had anybody knock on our door and say, we would like to buy your house and live here. As a matter of fact, the township in the past has even pointed developers to that property. They've come and talked to me and said, we were at the township and they pointed out to us that this is one of the, if not the only developable property left in this area, and talked to me with that as an intro. In fact, the township even approached us for putting a fire station on that property. So those are all uses that would be commercial, not residential.
How many acres do you have there, sir?
Pardon?
Roughly how many acres do you have there?
It's with right-of-way. At one point, it was about 1 2/3. I think the right-of-way has, the state has purchased right-of-way that is no longer part. So that's decreased. It's probably about 1.5.
Okay.
Rough guess.
Thank you.
So office is an acceptable use of that property with buffers, as you've been talking about. We've even tried to do buffers for the neighbors behind us. We keep a lot of foliage along the creek, but the buffers that we maintain are not as good as what buffers you would require if that property were to be developed as an office, for an office site. There are also problems with that property as a residence. A car has hit that house. A different car hit the fire hydrant in front of that house and ended up over 100 feet into my yard. And 5 seconds earlier, I was in that yard where that car stopped. The mailbox has been run over 2 separate times. There was a handgun discarded in our driveway during a police chase. There is a lot of trash that I constantly pick up. It wouldn't surprise me. I would say I probably average 1 30-gallon trash bag a week of collecting trash. Now, I will say most of that comes from Madeira, Sunoco area. So I'm not blaming Sycamore Township. It's just a fact of life. The creek has changed over the years. As mentioned, the creek that runs through that property. Having lived there 36 years ago, there was a lot less development when we moved in. The creek was smaller, did not carry as much water. Now it carries a lot of water. It can be 5 or 6 foot deep toward the Montgomery Road area, and that is a raging torrent, believe me. I have seen on more than one occasion, as it starts to rain, the creek is very, very gentle. It always has water in it year round. And without rain, it's gentle. When it starts to run off, it looks like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden you can see a wall of water about this high, about 1 foot high, just come rushing down the creek. Now you can imagine small children, that's quite a hazard. Let me get back to my notes. It would be dangerous to raise a family there that have small children. We always knew that if we were blessed with children that we would have to move because, without children, fine, we can deal with it. But with children, I don't feel it's acceptable. And obviously, no one has ever knocked on our door where we've had many developers knock on our door. Nobody's ever knocked on the door and said, I'd like to live here. Now, we're not asking to rezone now. I know this isn't a rezoning meeting. That would have to be considered when we get too old to live there and decide to move. What we're asking for is for the property to maintain the designation that it's always had. That's always been the obvious and best use of that property. We are fully aware of how difficult rezoning this property would be. It's a long, arduous process. That's one reason we have not done it. We've had other things, mainly family members and careers that we've had to take care of. We haven't tried to sell it and have it redeveloped. That's something for the future. That's when we get too old to live there, and we understand that is the obvious and best use of that property. And I do thank you for your consideration. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
You've got two addresses on there, 6901 and 8253, but that's a single parcel.
That was originally two parcels. We consolidated it in order to expedite the widening of Kugler Mill Road.
Okay.
Let me just note for the record also at 7 p.m., which is the scheduled start time for our regular trustee meeting. If anyone's tuning in to watch that right now, our public hearing is running over from some zoning matters. Please continue. Mr. Weed, did you have other questions?
Nope.
Mr. LaBarbera, any questions?
No question. No.
Anything else you'd like us to consider as we go about considering this overall plan, sir?
I think it's mainly the location. It was mentioned that it could be hard to develop. There have been property across the street. The creek was piped and quite extensively. There's a property on the corner of Kenwood and Galbraith where the creek was piped. That would be something for some developer to decide, not for me. But the property is developable if somebody wants to do it. It is also could serve as an office. An office could be built on the property that is there, without affecting the creek at this point. That's also something for a developer to consider.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
And sorry to hear about what was going on with in-laws and your parents also.
Thank you.
So, from a staff perspective, I certainly don't have an issue with recategorizing this as office. The only question I have is we are right at the boundary area of two policy areas, and depending on which policy area this would go into, it would dictate the intensity. Based on some of the physical constraints on here, we may want to consider putting this in the original Montgomery Road policy area. That would certainly allow for some flexibility and allow for the small size and physical dimensions of this site to dictate its overall intensity. It would develop as a PUD. There's really no way with this size of site. So there's already some intensity controls. If we were to put it into the central Montgomery Road policy area, there would be additional recommendations to reduce the intensity of it. It's probably too small of a site to bear that. It is just a general policy document. It does not control development on the site. That's why we have the zoning code in place, which is our other level. But where would we want this to go? Do we want it to go to the southern Montgomery Road or the central?
I think it belongs in the Montgomery Road portion, not the
Right.
southern part.
Okay.
And I, on the other hand, lean toward the central, although, as you say, the site constraints probably mean it's going to be constrained anyway. And the reason I say that is that's a very sensitive location, which certainly should be commercial, facing Montgomery Road there. The question is, at the back border of it, what happens there? And there's sort of a line drawn there where many of us have been working to keep Kugler Mill Road residential from basically the Stanley's backyard on up to Kenwood Road and beyond. And so we wouldn't want anything moving beyond there or towering over anything there. On the other hand, the way it's set up, that's probably not a concern. I'm imagining there wouldn't be anything any larger than the Beacon facility across the road right now there, and probably something smaller because of the site constraints,
smaller.
really. And that site was a result of a negotiation among the trustees, the neighbors, there was a lawsuit and so forth, but that was eventually done in a way that was satisfactory to everyone, including the neighbors there, with it fronting on Montgomery Road. So as long as we're preserving those things, I guess I don't care as much which area it goes in, but we want to make sure that the neighborhood behind there is protected, because that is the line behind that property.
Yep. So keep in mind, the planning and zoning, the overall development philosophy that the township is adopting, essentially, is, the land use plan, okay, is a guiding document. It's not true. It's policy in the sense that it guides, it directs the processes that we have in place, but it's not the legislation. It's not the rule of law, I guess. So we have this.
But it is persuasive on the other hand.
It is persuasive,
In
yes.
a lawsuit, if
Right.
someone's seeking a zone change and the plan says do it, that's
True.
added support
Yeah.
for it.
So we have the land use map, okay, the proposed land use map. Then we have the policy areas, and then when we actually get into the individual design of our sites, the way we set up our design review with our PUDs, then we get to not necessarily hyper regulate, but we're truly directing the final design of these sites with these overall guiding principles. So for this particular site, I think it's a dime one way, 10 cents another. And we still have that final control. We have the boundary buffer requirements in place. I would probably lean toward Montgomery Road, allowing for some flexibility that a tighter site like this would need. So, but
I can go with that. That's
I'll
fine.
go with that.
okay. All right. So it sounds like I need to put a little polish on this before it gets adopted. So I'm not going to be asking for a resolution tonight if that's the general direction from the town, from the board.
Yeah, that makes
Okay,
sense.
that's fine.
Makes sense.
So just so we're clear, I'm going to recategorize this particular site to office. I'm going to get the mixed-use definition back into this document. I apologize for that. What do we want to do with the school road, 16 acres? Do we want to leave that in that recreation designation, or do we want to just leave that as vacant land until there's some formal discussion with the board in the
I would
future?
suggest leave it as is right now, simply because there's not really a material distinction anyway, and you're going to stir up a lot of controversy if you take it from being called parkland right now.
That's fine.
I would leave this.
Yeah.
Leave it? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I would prefer to punt on Blue Ash Road, that Blue Ash Road corridor. It's already been identified as a critical policy area by Zoning Commission. They have set a task for me and a potential steering committee as well as themselves to get that policy area in place. I think we still want the framework document, and I think it's still valid, and valid and has value in its current state. So I'd like to make these changes, bring this back to the board at probably the second meeting in January.
18th,
That'll
yeah.
give me enough time to adjust this, and we'll have a resolution to get ready potentially that night.
As you go through it, by the way, notice Reed Hartman is spelled a few different ways in there. It had extra N's at least once, so check for that.
I can't tell you how many I's have been on this document. Mine are crossed at
That's
this
a hard
point.
one to spell check.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
All right. I will say the last thing I'll say about this document tonight, it has already been vetted by Hamilton County staff, planning staff. It has not been through Planning Commission. They requested that the Board of Trustees approve it first, and then we'll submit to Planning Commission for adoption in a more regional setting.
So if we adopt it and they come back and don't like it, what happens then?
Good question. I'll have to. Yeah, this is a new process
Does it
for me.
bind us?
I would have.
I don't
I would have
think it
taken it to
Yeah.
them first for as,
Yep.
and get an advisory recommendation from them.
And-
We received quite a bit of accolades for this document. They love the framework. They like the idea of the policy areas. It makes a lot of sense for a more urbanized and mature community. So there were no major critiques from Hamilton County
That's
staff.
good, and you raise a good
Yep.
point. You and our zoning commission and the land use committee, including Ms. Schwegman on that and others, have done a lot of work on this. It's a very nice product coming out of it, so.
So,
Thank
like I said, it is a living, breathing document. We will, even once it's approved, it will be updated on a regular basis.
All right, so it sounds like we have marching orders here. Is there any further comment from anyone as to the plan currently or as discussed? If not, we have another agenda item on the public hearing, don't we?
We do, and I am actually, I am certainly prepared to go over it tonight, and I can give you an overview. One thing that I harped on and discussed in great detail with the steering committee as well as zoning commission is that text amendments, your zoning document, should be based on a solid comprehensive plan, which this is. I would prefer not to get a formal approval on any text amendments until we have this document in place. Not because I think that these text amendments really have any necessary bearing. It's just it's a point of principle, and I think we should stick to it in small text amendments as well as large
Makes
ones.
sense. So is there any point in going forward with any public hearing at this point as to that, as opposed to scheduling that for later then?
We're already over time. I'm happy to introduce it to you if you'd like, but I'm
Aye.
also happy to close the public hearing now, and we'll reconvene at the second meeting in January.
I would suggest we move on unless my fellow trustees want to discuss it. Let me just ask, was there anyone here from the public intending to speak as to that matter, the text amendments? All right.
Very, very quickly, it has to do with how we calculate rear area, and it has to do with how we allow fences to be placed in yards. That's it.
All right. Any further business for the public hearing? Hearing none, we will call this public hearing to a close. It is currently 7:12 p.m. We're going to take a 5-minute recess before we start our regular meeting, so that will start at 7:17-ish. Thank you.